So we are continuing our very happy discussion of Krishna book. And this chapter is chapter 13 of Srila Prabhupada's Krishna book. And the chapter is called The Stealing of the Boys and the Calves by Lord Brahma. The Stealing of the Boys and the Calves by Lord Brahma. We had just read the previous chapter to bring us up to a slight bit of memory, the killing of Aghasura demon. And so this whole affair wasn't discussed for 1 year, and now we're going to find out why. Yes, why. The mystery shall be unfolded. When they say that's the new phrase is unpacked, right? Yeah. You hear that one? Yeah. We have to unpack this new story. We have to unpack the story of Lord Brahma stealing the calves and the boys, and unpack the mystery of the timeline, why 1 whole year went by without anybody talking about the Aghasura killing. Sukadeva Goswami was very much encouraged when Maharaj Parikshit asked him why the cowherd boys did not discuss the death of Aghasura until after 1 year had passed. And he explained thus, quote, "My dear king, you are making the subject matter of the transcendental pastimes of Krishna fresher by your inquisitiveness. It is said that it is the nature of a devotee to constantly apply his mind and his energy and his words and ears, etc., in hearing and chanting about Krishna. That is called Krishna consciousness. And for one who is rapt in hearing and chanting Krishna, the subject matter never becomes hackneyed or old. That is the significance of transcendental subject matter in contrast to material subject matter. Material subject matter becomes stale, and one cannot hear a certain subject for a long time. He wants to change. But as far as transcendental subject matter is concerned, it is called Nitya Ananda Navayam Mana. This means that one can go on chanting and hearing about the Lord and never feel tired, but will remain fresh and eager to hear more and more. It is the duty of the spiritual master to disclose all confidential subject matter to the inquisitive and sincere disciple. Thus, Sukadeva Goswami began to explain why the killing of Aghasura was not discussed until 1 year had passed. Sukadeva Goswami told the king, quote, "Now, hear of this secret with attention. After saving his friends from the mouth of Aghasura, and after killing the demon, Lord Krishna brought his friends to the bank of the Jamuna and addressed them as follows. He said, 'My dear friends, just see how this spot is very nice for taking lunch and playing on the soft, sandy Jamuna bank. You can see how the lotus flowers in the water are beautifully blown and how they distribute their flavor all around. The tripping of the birds along with the cooing of the peacocks, surrounded by the whispering of the leaves and the trees, combined and then present sound vibrations that echo one another. And this just enriches the beautiful scenery created by the trees here. Let us have our lunch in this spot because it is already late and we are feeling hungry. Let the calves remain near us and let them drink water from the Jamuna while we engage in our lunch taking. The calves may engage in eating the soft grasses that are on this spot.' On hearing this proposal from Krishna, all the boys became very glad and said, 'Certainly, let us all sit down and take our lunch.' And they all let loose their calves to eat the soft grass, and sitting down on the ground and keeping Krishna in the center, they began to open their different boxes brought from home. Lord Sri Krishna was seated in the center of the circle, and all the boys kept their faces toward him. They ate and constantly enjoyed seeing the Lord face to face. Krishna appeared to be the whirl of the lotus flower, and the boys surrounding him appeared to be its different petals. The boys collected flowers and leaves and flowers and barks of the trees and placed them under their different boxes. And thus they began to eat their lunch, keeping company with Krishna. And while taking the lunch, each boy began to manifest different kinds of relations with Krishna, and they enjoyed each other's company with joking words. While thus enjoying lunch with his friends, Lord Krishna's flute was pushed within the belt of his cloth, and his bugle and cane were pushed on the left side of his cloth. He was holding a lump of foodstuffs in his left hand. Foodstuffs prepared with yogurt, butter, rice, and pieces of fruit in his left palm, which could be seen through his petal-like finger joints. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who accepts the results of all great sacrifices, was laughing and joking, enjoying lunch with his friends in Vrindavan. And thus the scene was being observed by the demigods from heaven. And as for the boys, they were all simply enjoying transcendental bliss in the company of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. At that time, the calves that were pasturing nearby entered into the deep forest, allured by new grasses. And gradually they went out of sight. When the boys saw the calves were not nearby, they became afraid for their safety, and they immediately cried out, "Krishna!" Krishna is the killer of fear personified. Everyone is afraid of fear personified, but fear personified is afraid of Krishna. By crying out the word Krishna, the boys at once transcended the fearful situation. Out of his great affection, Krishna did not want his friends to give up their pleasing lunch engagement and go searching for the calves. He therefore said, quote, "My dear friends, you need not interrupt your lunch. Go on enjoying. I am going personally where the calves are." Unquote. Thus, Lord Krishna immediately started to search out the calves in the caves and the bushes. He searched mountain holes and in the forest, but nowhere could he find them. At the time when Aghasura was killed, all the demigods were looking on the incident with great surprise. Brahma, who was born out of the lotus flower growing out of the navel of Lord Vishnu, also came to see. He was surprised how a little boy like Krishna could act so wonderfully. Although he was informed that the little cowherd boy was the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he wanted to see more glorified pastimes of the Lord, and thus he stole all the calves and the cowherd boys and took them to a different place. Lord Krishna, therefore, in spite of searching for the calves, could not find them, and he even lost his boyfriends on the bank of the Jamuna, where they had been taking their lunch. In the form of a cowherd boy, Lord Krishna was very little in comparison to Brahma, but because he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he could immediately understand that all the calves and boys had been stolen by Brahma. Krishna thought, Brahma has taken away all the boys and calves. Now how can I alone return to Vrindavan? The mothers will be aggrieved. Therefore, in order to satisfy the mothers of his friends, as well as to convince Brahma of the supremacy of the Personality of Godhead, he immediately expanded himself as the cowherd boys and the calves. In the Vedas, it is said that the Supreme Personality of Godhead expands himself in so many living entities by his energy. Therefore, it is not very difficult for him to expand himself again into so many boys and calves. He expanded himself to become exactly like the boys, who were of all different features in facial and bodily construction, and who were different in their clothing and ornaments and in their behavior and personal activities. In other words, everyone has different tastes, being individual souls. Each person has entirely different activities and behavior. And yet Krishna exactly expanded himself into all the different positions of the individual boys. He also became the calves, who were also of different sizes and colors and activities, etc. This was possible because everything is an expansion of Krishna's energy. In the Vishnu Purana, it is said, Parasya Brahmana Shakti. Whatever we actually see in the cosmic manifestation, be it matter or the activities of the living entities, is simply an expansion of the energies of the Lord, as heat and light are the different expansions of fire. Thus expanding himself as the boys and calves in their individual capacities, and surrounded by such expansions of himself, Krishna entered the village of Vrindavan. The residents had no knowledge of what had happened, and after hearing and entering the village, Vrindavan, all the calves entered their respective cowsheds, and the boys also went to their respective mothers and homes. Page turning problem here. And the mothers of the boys heard the vibration of their flutes before their entrance, and to receive them they came out of their homes and embraced them. And out of maternal affection milk was flowing from their breasts, and they allowed the boys to drink it. However, their offering was not exactly to their boys, but to the Supreme Personality of Gadi, who had expanded himself into such boys. This was another chance for all the mothers of Vrindavan to feed the Supreme Personality of Gadi with their own milk. Therefore, Lord Krishna gave not only Jasoda the chance of feeding him, but this time he gave the chance to all the elderly gopis. All the boys began to deal with their mothers as usual, and the mothers also, on the approach of evening, began to bathe their respective children and decorate them with tilak and ornaments and give them necessary food after the day's labor. The cows also, who were away at the pasturing ground, returned in the evening and began to call all the respective calves, and the calves immediately came to their mothers, and the mothers began to lick the bodies of their calves. These relations between cows and the gopis with their calves and boys remained unchanged, although actually the original calves and the boys were not there. Actually, the cows' affection for their calves and the elderly gopis' affection for their boys causelessly increased. Their affection towards increased naturally, even though the calves and boys were not their offspring. Although the cows and elderly gopis of Vrindavan had greater affection for Krishna than for their own offspring. And after this incident, their affection for their offspring increased exactly as it did for Krishna. And for 1 year, continually, Krishna himself expanded as the calves and the cowherd boys, and was present in the pasturing ground. As it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's expansion is situated in everyone's heart as the Supersoul. Similarly, instead of expanding himself as Supersoul, he simply expanded himself as a portion of the cows and the cowherd boys for 1 continuous year. One day, when Krishna, along with Balaram, was maintaining the calves in the forest, they saw some cows grazing on top of Govardhan Hill. The cows could see down into the valley where the calves were being taken care of by the boys, and suddenly, on sighting their calves, the cows began to run towards them. They leaped downhill and joined front and rear legs. The cows were so melted with affection for their calves that they did not care about the rough path from the top of Govardhan Hill down to the pasturing ground. They began to approach their calves with their milk bags full of milk and their tails raised upwards. When they were coming down the hill, their milk bags were pouring milk onto the ground. And out of intense maternal affection for the calves, although they were not their own calves, these calves had their own calves. These cows had their own calves, and the calves that were grazing beneath Govardhan Hill were larger. They were not expected to drink milk directly from the milk bag, but were satisfied with the grass. Yet all the cows came immediately and began to lick their bodies, and the calves also began to suck milk from their milk bags. There appeared to be a great bondage of affection between the cows and the calves. Mystery. When the cows were running down from the top of Govardhan Hill, the men who were taking care of them tried to stop them. Elderly cows are taken care of by the men, and the calves are taken care of by the boys. And as far as possible, the calves are kept separate from the cows so that the cows do not drink all the available milk. Therefore, the men who were taking care of the cows on top of Govardhan Hill tried to stop them, but they failed. And baffled by their failure, they were feeling ashamed and angry. They were very unhappy. And when they came down, they saw their children taking care of the cows. They all of a sudden became very affectionate toward the children. It was very astonishing. Although the men came down disappointed, baffled, and angry, as soon as they saw their own children, their hearts melted with great affection. At once their anger, dissatisfaction, and unhappiness disappeared. They began to show paternal love for their children, and with great affection they lifted them into their arms and embraced them. They began to smell their children's heads and enjoy their company with great happiness. After embracing their children, the men again took the cows back to the top of Govardhan Hill. Along the way, they began to think of their children, and affectionate tears fell from their eyes. Hare Krishna. I think we'll stop here. I know this is a little bit long. Yeah, it's a good place. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.